Part 7, Chapter 6 of Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy, translated by Nathan Haskell Dole. This Librivox recording is in the public domain, read by Mary Ann Spiegel.
"Perhaps they are not receiving?" asked Levin, as he entered the vestibule of Count Bole's house.
"Oh, yes, permit me," answered the Swiss, resolutely taking the visitor's shuba.
"What a nuisance," thought Levin, drawing off one of his gloves with a sigh, and turning his hat in his hands. "Now, why did I come? Now, what am I going to say to them?"
Passing through the first drawing-room, he met the Countess Bolle at the door, who, with a perplexed and severe face, was giving orders to a servant. When she saw Levin, she smiled, and invited him to walk into a small parlor where voices were heard. In this room were sitting her two daughters and a Muscovite colonel whom Levin knew. Levin joined them, passed the usual compliments, and sat down near a divan, holding his hat on his knee.
"How is your wife? Have you been to the concert? We were not able to go. Mamma had to attend to the requiem," said one of the young ladies.
"Yes, I heard about it. What a sudden death," said Levin.
The countess came in, sat down on the divan, and asked also about his wife and the concert.
Levin replied, and asked some questions about the sudden death of Madame Apraxin.
"But then she was always in delicate health."
"Were you at the opera yesterday?"
"Yes, I was."
"Lucia was very good."
"Yes, very good," said he, and he began, seeing that it was entirely immaterial to him what they thought about him, to repeat what he had heard 100 times about the singer's extraordinary talent. The Countess Bolle pretended that she was listening. Then, when he had said all he had to say, and relapsed into silence, the colonel, who had hitherto held his peace, began also to speak. The colonel also talked about the opera, and about an illumination. Then, saying something about a supposititious full journée at Turin, the colonel, laughing, got up and took his departure. Levin also got up, but a look of surprise on the countess's face told him that it was not yet time for him to go. 2 minutes more at least were necessary. He sat down. But, as he thought what a foolish figure he was cutting, he was more and more incapable of finding a subject of conversation. "Are you going to the public meeting?" asked the countess. "They say it will be very interesting." "No, but I promised my belle-sœur that I would call for her there," replied Levin.
Silence again ensued. The mother exchanged a look with her daughter.
"Now it must be time to go," thought Levin, and he rose.
The lady shook hands with him, and charged him with 1000 choses for his wife. The Swiss, as he put on his shuba for him, asked his address, and wrote it gravely in a large, handsomely bound book.
"Of course, it's always the same to me, but how useless and ridiculous it all is," thought Levin, comforting himself with the thought that everyone did the same thing. And he went to the public meeting of the committee, where he was to find his sister-in-law to bring her home with him. At the public meeting of the committee there was a great throng of people, and society was well represented. Levin reached the place just in time to hear a sketch which all said was very interesting. When the reading of the sketch was finished, society came together, and Levin met Sviatsky, who invited him to come that very evening to a meeting of the Society of Rural Economy, at which a very important report was to be read. He also met Stepan Arkadyevitch, who had just returned from the races, and many other acquaintances, and Levin talked much and heard many opinions relating to the meeting and the new piece and the lawsuit. But apparently in consequence of his weariness and the strain which he began to feel, he made a blunder in speaking of a certain lawsuit, and this blunder he afterward remembered with annoyance. Speaking of the recent punishment of a foreigner who had been tried in Russia, and that it would have been irregular to punish him by exile, Levin repeated what he had heard the evening before in a conversation with a friend of his. "I think that to send him abroad is just the same as to punish a fish by throwing it into the water," said Levin.
Too late he remembered that his comparison which he put forth to express his thought, though he had heard his friend use it, was really taken from a fable by Kryloff, and that his friend had taken it from the feuilleton of a newspaper. Returning home with his sister-in-law, and finding Kitty well and happy, Levin went to the club. End of chapter 6.